Okay, everybody, can you hear me? Is this on? Yeah. We're just checking to see if some other folks are coming and didn't want to get started without them. But just some housekeeping. We wanted to make sure everybody had one of the sheets. If not, I have an extra one up here, or Ian will bring some more. And the other thing I wanted to make sure is you guys all signed up for the cooler, just to make sure. So if you haven't, just raise your hand and we'll make sure that you get signed up. We're going to go through, let's see, this is our 9th one, Leslie. And it's virtually the same format, but really our whole scope of tonight is really to get down to some topics that we think that really could make a difference for our operations and our communities and our industry. And the staff has done a pretty awesome job of having us go through some exercises to get us to thinking about some topics and also for you to interact. So be ready. I'm just waiting here still a little bit, but if you just look on page 2, you'll see where it says share your thoughts on producer profitability. Just a heads up, we're going to go to this Menti website, and you see there's a highlighted code. That's the code for this event, or you can use that QR code to go there, and then that will prompt your phone to start participating in the survey. So we'll get to that here in a minute, but that's just to kind of get you guys warmed up and ready to participate, because you'll find out real soon. There we go. You know, the whole point of this is to get your guys' ideas, and you'll see that as we go through here. Thanks for coming. I see you're still chaperoning. That's good. It is a full-time job.
Choose this one here. I guess we'll go ahead and get rolling with the stock growers listening session. Sure appreciate all you guys showing up and providing some input for the stock growers. This is Turk Stovall, second vice president with the Montana Stock Growers. Ian with the young stock growers is the membership. Okay. Member services guy. And there's a representative here that's running for Congress, Rick Holden. And I'd like to say myself and my family, my mom and dad, Dexter and Carla, were sure honored to host this event And if it wasn't for you guys, you producers out here, we sure wouldn't be here. And just glad to have everything happening today.
So I think we have another candidate in the room. Dana, do you want to just say do we have any other candidates or congressional state representatives here tonight? I might also like to introduce Leslie and Dean. Leslie Robinson is our first vice president, and Dean Laram is on our board of directors. He's up in your country, up by Shelby. And Dana was on our board, termed out this last year, and we awfully miss him. And we have really an awesome team. You guys met Ian as you came in. He's part of membership services, and you have Allie here, and she's in governmental affairs, which is a thankless job, as we all spent last week in Washington, D.C., actually carrying a lot of the messages that we've heard from the previous meetings. But, you know, I'm just going to start this off, again, introducing myself. My name's Turk Stovall from, I'm actually from Billings. My family ranches south of Billings, and we have a feed yard there, as we also have a feed yard in Shepherd, Montana. And I serve as the second vice president of Montana Stock Growers. And really the reason why we're here on these listening sessions really is a foundation of members of the Montana Stock Growers were involved in a working group from the LMA. And LMA is the Livestock Marketing Association. And this happened a couple of years ago. And that working group was trying to get down to, hey, here are some real issues to keep our beef industry alive and having the next generation take over and making sure that these ranchers are profitable and even can survive going on into the future. And how can we meet together as an industry and try to really talk about that? And so from those meetings, a group of board members got together and they put together some resolutions that says, hey, we want to really focus on multi-generational ranching in Montana, and what do we need to do to help that? We want to also focus on what kind of programs or tools do ranchers need to be profitable and sustainable long into the future, and a resolution was passed on that. There was a directive passed saying, hey, we are directing Montana stock growers to create some unity in our industry. We have many different agricultural organizations that represent us all, and sometimes we don't always have the same agenda. And as Joe Goggins would say, hey, this organization over here, this might be their number one agenda, and then this organization over here might have their number one agenda, but when we go to Washington, those agendas don't match up. So could you imagine being our public official? Like, who are you supposed to listen to? And we're at the point now where we're saying, hey, you know what, there's some topics out there that we just don't seem like we can see eye to eye on. And that is country of origin labeling. That's the beef checkoff. That's the fat cattle market or the fed cattle market. And we're just saying, for tonight's event, we're just not going to talk about them. We've debated it for 20 plus years. Doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere. But let's focus tonight on some issues where we think we can really make a difference. And so what we did is we took those resolutions that were passed at the Montana Stock Growers Annual Convention in Billings last December, and we boiled it down to these 5 points that you see on your list. And so with that, Rich Roth, another board member, comes in fashionably late. Thank you, Rich. Hey, hopefully you got your spurs in the town hall. So that's what we're going to focus on tonight is these 5 topics. And we're going to go through some interaction to talk about them. And then what we'll do is we'll open it up, and we'll virtually have an open mic for if there's some other things that you guys want to bring forward and talk about. But this is what I wanted to make sure that you understand, is you are really part of a greater cause, and you're really part of really a movement that's being looked at across our country right now. Montana is on the map. We're one of the first organizations that went across their own state and said, hey, let's try to get to something that's really going to matter, and really let's all try to work on it together. And let's make it actually, these are ideas that are really coming from local ideas, real Montana farmers and ranchers, and we're trying to compile that to really make it meaningful to where we can take it to our congressional delegation as well as our state delegation, in of which we've already started that process. Myself, Leslie, our president, John Grandy, our executive director, Rayleigh Honeycutt, Ellie, was all in Washington, D.C. last week, and we are already starting to take the feedback that we've brought from these listening sessions straight to Washington. And so I'm going to hand it over to Ian, and we'll start off on our kind of our interactive process through that Menti.
Perfect, yep. So on the back of that first page of that packet you received when you walked in, it's got a QR code that you can use your phone to scan there, and that'll take you right there. And then highlighted, you see the code. It's 69280941. But if you just put that code in there, that will let you access the survey. And then we'll be able to put the answers up here live so that you can see what your peers and fellow producers are saying to the questions. So, and if you need help, me or Ellie can help you get that straightened out. So you should see this first question up there, and the question is, when you think about producer profitability, what 3 words come to mind? Does anybody need help getting to the survey?
It really has been pretty fun watching the different responses across the state. I would say most have a lot of in common, but there's been some with a little different emphasis depending on if you're in Dillon or Glasgow or Miles City or Billings. But for the most part, there's a lot of similarities.
And for those that might not be familiar with a word cloud, the more times a response is issued, the larger that word gets. And it'll be closer to the center, so you can kind of see which ones are getting the most conversation. Right now we have inputs, profit, price, interest rates, decrease in labor, capital growth.
The scale, I like that one. Interest rates have been a big discussion point.
Give you all about 10, 15 more seconds to get your responses in.
Some of the smaller words, we had land prices on there. Obviously, that's also been a big topic, just how our state has changed and a lot of people have come in. And, you know, that's not necessarily your neighbor, it's someone out of state. And talked a lot about that as well.
So the next question is, in 20 words or less, share with us the biggest challenges you face in your operations growth and success. So some of the responses so far is access to grazing land, either leased or owned, seems to be out of reach for any entry-level operation. Weather and labor, finding better ways to take advantage of emerging markets. Interest rates, weather and labor. Figuring out which opportunities to take, knowing we have less and less labor time and money. Weather, labor, supply, and rising input costs.
Yeah, whoever put in the first generation ranch and loans, I'd like you to maybe speak up later too when we get to that on barriers to entry.
Give another 10, 15 seconds for any last responses.
Labor's been a big common one. We hear a lot, as well as access to grass. And of course, interest.
That's what we'll give you the mic later. The mic will be your best tool yet.
So the next question is, in the last 10 years, what tools or programs have been the most beneficial to your operations profitability? I'm not sure if Mr. Turk mentioned it earlier, but we are putting the recordings of all our meetings on the website at mtbeef.org, where you can go, if you are curious about what your peers around the state are saying, you can go watch all the past meetings we've had, and you can see what folks are saying in Sydney, Miles City, Three Forks, all over. So just wanted to make sure you're aware of that as well. Some of the responses so far, we have good loan officer, low interest rates, disaster programs, government payments, marketing options, range drought insurance, LRP, having family come back to the operation, social media for both marketing and finding product services.
Also, and who's mentioned having the family come back would be nice. We've been sharing information of stories about where families are trying to come home and what do they need to do. And if you have a success story you're willing to share, that would be great too later.
The next question is, what do you believe will be the biggest challenge in the livestock industry will face in the next 20 years? Looks like labor, input costs, and taxes are kind of the leading responses right now.
Regulations has definitely been common in the past ones, as well as labor, input costs, interest. It's pretty sobering. Someone put in there having a community left, and we've been talking about that a lot in different areas. Just what do we need to do to keep our communities thriving and having people wanting to come to our communities, especially our family.
Give you all 10 more seconds for any last responses.
And just to mention too, and we'll probably repeat this, but our website is mtbeef.org, and we have a comment route on there as well. So if you don't get something said today or didn't get it up here, please utilize that tool too, because we really want your input.
Next question is regarding succession planning. Share with us which category you most relate to. I'm trying to remember what the categories even are. Yeah. Yep. So we have, I am a young producer who is entering the business or transitioning into an operation. I do not have a succession plan. I am in the process of finalizing a succession plan. I have a succession plan. I plan to exit the livestock industry and disperse, or this is not applicable to me. And the number one category right now is the I am a young producer who is entering the business or transitioning into an operation.
The average young starting producer is 47. It is. Yeah, it's changed. Yep. You're still, yeah, you're still entry level. I don't know if everyone is completed theirs yet, but I see there isn't anybody planning on exiting the business. We've had, I think, at least one or two, is that right, Ellie, in each session?
Yeah, so that kind of concludes the live survey portion for the front end. We will have a few questions at the end after the open comment period, so don't put your phones away just yet or close out, because we will have a few more questions at the end.
Thank you, Ian. So that was good. Proud of you guys. That was a good exercise, kind of getting things limbered up here. So, we're going to get into really more of the interactive part, just getting feedback from you guys. And we're going to kind of roll up our sleeves and we're going to look at these 5 points. And what these 5 points are, I mean, they're not the solve all, but they're a great starting point. And as we've kind of, muscled through this and talked with a lot of people, it really does catch a lot of concerning areas. And so we're just going to take 10, 15 minutes per point, and we're going to talk about it. And so the first one we want to talk about is taxes. The elephant in the room is the estate tax, the death tax, the most unfair tax there is. That our exemptions are going to expire in 2025. So right now, as a couple, you can exempt $26 million. If it goes back to what it was, it's a matter of millions of dollars. This not only destroys ranches, but it destroys small business. And with our current political climate, it's very unknown which direction that's going to go. So last week, when we were meeting with everyone last week, that was probably one of our number one topics to talk about. And really, we don't believe that there should be an estate tax. When we sit and talk about we are the producers of protein for our country, we actually believe this is a national security issue. You can't destroy the producers that are keeping our country fed. And those how we talk about it. And so we've been trying to get ideas. So if we can't get it eliminated, what should it be? What should the exemption levels be? We've had some really great discussion. I want to say it was in Glasgow, where there was one idea, and I'm just sharing this because our point is to try to get you to thinking about it and see if you can bring in more ideas too. But we want to incentivize the fact to keep this land in production. We want to incentivize the fact that we want this to go to the next generation. So one idea that came from the producer group was, let's just say if you are giving your ranch to the next generation or family member or however it is, there is no estate tax. But with this caveat, is it has to stay in production for at least 10 years. And so when that pass is over to the next generation of ownership, sure, they can sell it. It's their land. They can do whatever they want with it. But if they sell it the first year, maybe they have to pay 100% of that estate tax. But it would regress out. Once you get to year 10, then maybe it's 0. And that was a pretty good suggestion. And that's what we're trying to learn from. That came from these groups. So another one is accelerated depreciation. That's expiring as well, too. And so that came up in Billings as something that we really need to hold on to as a tool for our operations. And so I'm just going to leave it over to you guys. And if you have some thoughts, if there's some other things we want to talk about, relative to tax, and we're just going to focus on tax for the next 10 minutes. And then what we'll do is we need you to talk in the mic, and then also, if you don't mind, just state your name and where you're from, And keep in mind, you're just not talking to us, you're talking, there's people online, and we just want to make sure your voice is heard, as well as recorded, so we can, because we really want to know. So go ahead, thank you.
Kevin Aberg, cow-calf producer, just about 15 miles south of Harlem here in Blaine County. I guess I have more of a question on it. How realistic is it that the estate tax applies to everything? How realistic is it that we would be able to focus it on agriculture and small businesses for that matter, but just in this room, agriculture in particular, to be able to focus it on that and make it available for us to more or less repeal it for agricultural use? Is that something that can be done under current tax codes? Would it have to become a thing where maybe the Department of Agriculture becomes in charge of what's taxed as far as a farm or ranch goes? Or would it be something that would be able to be broadened to all, industries and just personal tax for that matter? Because, we're talking about, farmers and ranchers are a very small percent of the population. And so has there been any input by experts or any kind of thought as to how realistic is it that we can get it focused on just food production to make sure that it stays in food production and doesn't get taken away out of there? I guess that's what I'm curious about that.
So, just so you know, I'm not an accountant. I'm barely a rancher or feed yard guy. But the one thing I do know is we will never get it unless we ask for it. And the other is it will take an act of Congress to change this. And now, and I believe if we keep this in the context of we have to keep our land in production for a long list, but let's just say it's just to even feed our country, I think we're going to get a long ways. Because, my gosh, who is going to argue with that? And I guess I can bluntly say Senator Daines is right there. He would be more aggressive on that. That's a real thing. And Leslie, do you want to make any comments on all that?
I guess I would just, I know you kind of talked about before, but we during COVID, they gave us the, oh my gosh, what
Essential.
is it? Essential. We're essential. And it's true. Without us producing the food, where is our country? So we need to stick to that point that we have been deemed essential, and it was correct.
So are you following me in the narrative? We're tying that all together. And that also came from that LMA working group about being essential, because it still comes down to we're a very important part of this country. I don't know if everyone gives us the credit, but we are. And I don't think we probably have gotten much more credit in history than when all the shelves were empty, or the beef supply chain stopped for a minute. Then it got real. So we need to remind everybody, in my opinion, and I think it's achievable. But I'm also the guy who will say it's not going to happen unless we ask for it. And that is why it takes all of us. It takes all of us having the same story and telling our story. And we were in D.C. We not only met with all our congressional as well as directors of departments, but we're also talking to virtually almost all the western states, all of their cattlemen's groups in CBA, saying, hey, we have to remind everybody what we're doing here. Great. It was a good question. Thank you. Anybody else? Dana?
Dana Darlington, Big Sandy. I think too, Turk, I think we talked about this before, but when you're talking to the congressman people, and I think you really need to hammer home that these are family businesses, whether it's a shoe store or a farm or a ranch, small community businesses. And some of us, most of us at one time or another, and maybe some still are, you know, we're taking over the operation from the last generation, and we didn't get paid great wages. We're not paying the next generation great wages. They're learning how to run the business. And so when you put that all into perspective and you have to pass it to the next generation, they have no money. I mean, they've barely been able to pay their grocery bill for 30 years. And now they're expected to come up with all this estate tax money. So if you could somehow incorporate that these are, you know, people work for 40, 50 years for nothing, more or less. So anyway, just along that lines.
It's a great point, and I assure you that is very much brought to, it's part of the story. Vital part of the story, really. Anybody else? Yeah, Rich, down here.
Rich Roth from Big Sandy. Just another thing on taxes, and we talked about it with the Montana Taxpayers Association the other day, and this is not estate taxes, but it's more, I think we all can agree, the county roads, things like that we drive on every day around here, and we're getting more and more of the pressures during, say, hunting season or recreation season, out-of-state people using all our services and our roads and everything around our area, and we're getting nothing for that. I think I'm actually, Blaine County is actually pretty dang good with county roads, but Choteau County is terrible, and we really are not very, the producers that live in those counties are the ones paying those, you know, exorbitant taxes, but it's still not enough to take care of our roads, our infrastructure, our towns, all those types of things are something that I think need to be looked at too. The infrastructure of our communities, as more and more people come to these areas and use the services and the things that are here, we're not seeing any benefit as people that actually live here and use those every day.
Leslie, just kind of, would you mind just have a point of information of sharing the governor's task force on taxes and land values and uses, recreation versus production?
Right, so the governor has set up a task force. I don't serve on the task force. We have asked John Lewis, who is a Montana stock grower member and also I think he's a current county commissioner still, to serve on that task force to kind of bring the perspective, I guess, from ranchers and from small rural areas to that. So there's two different task force that he has set up, but so the state is looking at that before the legislative session. And also they're looking at if land is purchased and it's taken out of production and it's just for recreation or for wildlife, should it be taxed at the same rate that agriculture is taxed at? So I think that's kind of an important thing to look at. I'm not sure where they'll come out, and it's just going to be some recommendations, I guess, to the legislature, but at least they're looking at different options.
If you wanted to participate or give comments, is there a route that you know of offhand?
I do not, but I guess if you went on mt.gov, I'm sure you'd find out if they're taking public comments on that.
And the other thing too, if you have anything on that nature or any of these, and an idea pops up leaving the meeting or later on, just call the MSGA office and talk to Allie or Ian or Ray Lee. Say, hey, I want to put some input into the state task force, and we'll figure out how to get it in there.
Sure, and they can probably put you in touch, get you the contact information for John Lewis too, because he would be a good person to talk to. He actually attended our Lewistown meeting, so that was helpful.
Anything else on taxes? Okay, let's just go to government programs. You know, government programs seems that it can develop kind of a little bit of electricity. And should our government be involved in the livestock industry or should it not? And as livestock industry, are we looking for a handout or are we not? And, you know, I don't know if that's what we're here to say, hey, we're for or against anything, but the bottom line is we do have some government programs that are already in existence. And we should be at the table to talk about them and just at least say, do they work? So of the young farmers and ranchers here, have you tried the FSA programs for young farmers and ranchers? Do they work? Are they even relevant in today's world? Is $600,000 going to do anything? We had one producer give feedback saying, hey, you know what? They're giving us just enough money to hang ourselves. You know, so we want that feedback. We've talked a lot about LRP, Livestock Risk Protection. There's a write-up in your packet if you haven't heard of it. And there's a tremendous amount of information on LRP. Is there anybody in the audience that sells LRP? So if you're not familiar with it, it's a subsidized put or option. And so what you're trying to do is look out and pay a premium to sell your cattle on. The advantage is you don't have to pay that premium until the cattle are sold. So it's self-financed. That's great. And the other thing that's really great, Rich, is you don't have a margin call. That's really nice, you know, especially with the interest rates the way they are right now. That has been a really good tool for a lot of people. It seems like it's a tool that is just still getting introduced. Not everybody knows about it. But it is for sure a tool that should be probably considered for your operation, especially when we're sitting here with record cattle prices. And it's pretty cheap insurance because you can actually get an LRP on unborn cattle. And so more or less we're to say, make sure that you are educated about it. And it could be a tool for you. The next level of what our resolution said that were passed is we need to look into LRP. There's some things we can improve in there. Should the subsidy be more? So it's a more attractive tool. So instead of $100 a head, and I'm just making an example here, maybe it should be $50 a head. Maybe that could be a tool for a younger producer to be able to go to Aaron, where's Aaron? And get a note to not only I need to finance cattle, but I also need to finance land, which is usually a bad ask, right, Aaron? At the same time. So, but point being is there any comments on those? And there's other programs like obviously PRF, the pasture, the rain insurance. That's been pretty popular as well. But let's just talk about these government programs and share your input. What needs to be improved or changed, or if you have a whole nother program that we need to be thinking about it, this is the place to talk about it.
So I think our policy is worded somewhat like equity and opportunity. So, and simplification too. We've heard a lot about just simplifying what is available already. So if you guys have any input, it'd be great. And I guess I just want to remind you too, like Turk said, if you're not comfortable talking on the mic or you think of something after the meetings, make sure you go to mtbeef.org and submit your comments also.
Dean.
Dean Laram, Sweetgrass Hills here, just west here in the windy country. But when you talk about these livestock programs, Turk, probably when there's a disaster, a year and a half till you get your payment is not acceptable. You got to go to Aaron. You got to say, hey, you got to wait on the money. You're paying 9%, 10%. You know, and I think they talk about the drought monitoring here in the state. We have to get more drought monitoring, and it's got to happen quicker. We work with our local FSA agency a lot on that, but you should not have to wait till you have to sell the cows, haul water and everything to get some money, and you're a year and a half out. Thank you.
So Ian or Ellie, can you tell me if we still have the drought portal on the Stock Grower website? I think we do. And there's a lot of people that don't know about the drought monitor. It's really important that people go onto the drought monitor and input what your current situations are. It helps with the drought program. So I'm pretty sure that it's still on our mtbeef.org.
Yes,
It
it
is.
is.
Perfect, thank you.
Hey, getting right up top here.
Jeff Krisick, Haver. One of the problems we've run into with the FSA programs, especially the beginning farmer and rancher program.
Can you talk in the mic just a little more?
Sorry, one of the problems we've run into with the beginning farmer and rancher program is the expectations for what you have to do in Montana are the same as the expectations for what you have to do, say, in Illinois. So cornfield in Illinois is going to be a lot more profitable than cattle here in Montana from an acre per acre standpoint. So it's not even worth our time to investigate into like the beginning farmer rancher program, because what we've been told are the requirements of the loan aren't meetable. FSA gets to decide what your AUM is, how much you're going to be able to produce on your property, and they say you have to pay your loan right out of that. You can subsidize a little from off-farm income, but not heavily. So to go from a hobby level to a production level with those FSA programs is really hard. So any kind of push we could put towards changing the requirements, depending on what region you're in, would be really helpful.
Excellent. There has been discussion on putting together, was it almost like an FSA advisory board for Montana, specifically to what you were just mentioning? Good, thank you. Anybody else? Any more young farmers and ranchers under 47, definitely under 50? Yeah, Dana.
Thanks, Dana Darlington, Big Sandy again. One of the things, and this is a conversation I have with a really good friend of mine, and we were just hanging out, and he's not a farmer rancher. He has a business, pouring foundation, very successful. And the conversation was, you know, we were talking about 4 years of drought, things are getting a little tight, and you know, input costs have doubled, tripled, some of them. And he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, he says, yeah, he says, I feel sorry for you guys. You know, if my input costs go up 15%, I just add it onto the bill. And that makes you think about the different industry that we are in. And I know we've talked about this before, you know, do we want subsidies, handouts to make our livelihood? And most of us would say no, you know, we don't want the government involvement. But at the same time, if you got rid of the LRP and some of these disaster things and pooled all that money together and came up with okay, the average input costs have gone up 15%, so add 15% onto your gross income, we're going to send you a check from the government. And that way, then you're on your own. Then it's up to you to manage your money the best you can, da-da-da-da. I don't know, it's just food for thought that, you know, we're not the same as any other industry, and we have no control how to get that 15% back. So, thanks.
Anybody else? Some thoughts were, young producer said, hey, he thought that was easier for him to go get financed to go and lease some farm ground, buy a tractor, and get into farming versus if he wanted to go and buy some bred heifers and lease some grass and start an operation. And so there was some discussion on that. Like, So what do the programs need to do to help incentivize more on the livestock side? And that goes back to what Leslie was saying in our resolution is pointing at, is this equity, meaning if you were to look at the government programs that come from the Farm Bill, you measure the farm programs in the billions, and you measure the livestock programs in the hundreds of millions. And there again, we are a very proud segment of the industry, but we also compete for the same land, and we compete for the same financing, and we compete for just to survive. And so, not that we have the answer, but it is a topic. You know, base acres on a piece of farm ground, should there be base acres relative to grass? I don't know, but that was brought up at a meeting as well too.
Another thing that was talked about too was beginning farmer and rancher. If you're, let's just say you're ranching with your family and maybe have 25, 50 head of cattle, but you've signed up for the FSA programs this whole time, and then maybe 10 years down the road, you actually get an opportunity to purchase property that at that time you have already been in the programs for 10 years and you're no longer eligible for the beginning farmer or rancher loans. So maybe looking at that, what is, you know, what really makes you a beginning farmer or rancher? I think that would be helpful too. And then like Turk said, the amounts, are the amounts enough or just enough to make you not successful?
Well, and as you said, you were trying to make this transition from, hey, I have a wage and I want to get into ranching, but you can't just quit your job and then all of a sudden, hey, hope for the best. Sure you can, but make sure everyone's on the same page on that one. But it's tough. It's a really tough transition. Anything else on government programs? And obviously we can touch back on this as well. Let's talk about labor. Seems like no matter where you go, you're going to talk about labor. And we're going to talk about, hey, I don't have enough help, or hey, we didn't have enough kids, or, you know, the kids don't want to come back, or I already burnt the kids out. What are we going to do? And what is the solution? And man, there's a lot of discussion on that. You know, obviously since the internet has come on, we put ads online. We get tremendous amount of people apply. They might be from Europe to, you know, you almost unlikely almost getting someone that's local to apply sometimes. So any thoughts on labor or comments or?
I never thought I'd be saying this because I sound like my father in this, because I was the kid that knew everything and did and all that stuff. But it has been interesting to me coming back to the ranch and seeing labor now. And I guess my thought or comment in this is that I think it goes back to, you know, I've really changed my mind. I'm not sure college is for everybody. I don't know. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of different things. But I certainly think, you know, our FFA and our VOAG and those things in our schools is a huge important thing, and because not everybody necessarily wants to go to college in that. And then I think our colleges, we have to get behind all of our universities and say, we got to get away from this, I'm going to just say it, woke and all this other stuff that they're actually teaching kids. I sit on the board for Northern Montana College for their ag program, and they now have diversity education as part of their curriculum for ag business. And I can bring them out to the ranch and show them some diversity education, I'll tell you. But it's a struggle. It really truly is. And I had they're good young kids. I had 3 kids come for calving this year. One packed up his stuff and left in the middle of the night. One gave me 2 days notice. The other one gave me 2 weeks notice. And they're just, I don't want to swear on this thing, but it's like is gone. Like, and they're not our kids. I'm pretty sure all of us here, I mean, we've kind of grown up this way, but the kids that I'm getting coming for internships and all this stuff, they don't know how to shut a light off. They don't know how to close a door. They don't know how to take their hat off the dinner table. They don't know how to say please and thank you. This is Steve Roth talking right now. Sorry, I don't know, it's just coming out in me. And because I was that kid, but I guess the comment to actually add something good, I think we really do need to put a push at our 2-year, 4-year schools, education places, even our high schools and things, to really continue to push, agriculture and all that comes with ag, so that our young people know what work really is and knows that there's good futures in it. There's opportunity there, but I think we're missing a lot. And I don't know this necessarily Big Sandy or Chinook or it's kind of elsewhere a little bit, but I think, I don't know, I'm not young enough to be there anymore, but if I listen to my kids talk about what they were doing in school, and my son who's graduating from Rocky next week, some of the classes he's taking just for business, I'm really appalled at, and how he got passing grades for writing, literature type things that just kind of fit what the teacher wanted to get an A. I read some of the titles of what he wrote, and it's completely against. I'd have killed him if he'd said some of that stuff to me, but he got a passing A grade for writing something that was completely just off the wall. So anyway, not to keep dragging it on, but I think there is a hope in more FFA, more VOAG, those things in high school, those types of trainings, and then certainly college, just making sure that people know how to work and know what it's like.
I guess, and Turk will get to it, but our last of the 5 is mentorship. And I think that probably goes a little bit in with what you're saying, Rich, and we need ideas on that also.
So go ahead.
Name's Alvin Windy Boy. I ranch out here in Rocky Boy, and we also just opening another ranch out in south of Lodgepole. And what Steve was talking about with the FFA and 4-H, I never was around those programs growing up, and I'm 73. And but what really was an eye-opener for me was I got 3 generations of kids. The 3rd generation she just graduated from Harlem High School last year, and what really encouraged her was she was in the 4-H program in Havre, and then she went over to Harlem her junior and senior year and really involved in FFA, and she came out to the place and blew my socks off when she started welding, and that's some of the things that she learned there. And she's kind of struggling right now. She's in Bozeman, going to school on her own. And what little cows we gave her, that was her backbone. And she took up showing cattle, Nile, and all these shows. But if there's any encouragement that can be done with whoever the stock grows or whatever, but I'm 100% behind that, because I see the product within my own little family. But I want to talk about something else that when you talk about the stock growers and all these other organizations, in a previous life that I had, the first time my dad, in 1959, we lived kind of way back in the mountains there, in log houses, no electricity. And he said he wanted to buy cows. He wanted to run cows. So I don't know where he got his financing from. The next thing I knew, 2 days later, we had 50 bred Hereford heifers. We calved them out. Well, winter was tough too. But anyway, we've been doing that ever since. Then when he left in 95, I already had a herd, and I just took his over. But when you talk about it's tough to get started with kids or whomever, it's even harder where I'm at on Rocky Boy and probably Fort Belknap. Fortunately, with Fort Belknap, my son was a sophomore in Harlem. My wife's uncle passed away 2 years ago, massive heart attack. Surprised us, he designated him as heir to his 800 some odd acres. And so his intention is to go to Northern and in some kind of ag background. But my wife was the bioenergy director there at MSGA Northern for about 9-10 years or so. And it certainly opened our eyes as to what the potential like Northern might have. But trying to talk to my daughter and going to some other ag school, she had this grand idea of going to Texas A&M or Colorado State. She wanted to be a vet. But then when she looked around, both in Rocky Boy and Fort Belknap, she said she's seen something that's missing, that's doable. And that's what the things that she learned. And she wants to be something in ag ed, whatever that meant. But the potential for kids in Rocky Boy isn't there in agriculture. I don't mean that negatively or facetiously. There's no stepping stone for them. And my daughter's seen that, and that's one of the things that she wants to do is create a 4-H FFA program in Rocky Boy. It's a start to do something to get kids, not necessarily all kids, but certain kids. Where we ranch in Rocky Boy, it's even getting tougher because I went down and visited her, my wife and I in Bozeman 2 weeks ago, and I hadn't been there in these 20 some odd years, but I see the bustling community that Bozeman is, and it blew my socks off how big that area has gone since the last time that I seen it. And is that synonymous with the rest of Montana? Maybe not up here. But the other point I want to make is in a previous life I was elected on the council in Rocky Boy for about 18 years. And my dad was chairman of the tribe for 22 years. I got off in 2004 and just strictly take care of cows. But prior to that, we started the Montana-Wyoming Indian Stock Growers. And we wanted to keep the politics out of it. So what we had done was we had a rancher from each of the Fort Peck, Fort Belknap, Rocky Boy, Blackfeet, Salish Kootenai, Crow, Cheyenne, and the 2 tribes in Wyoming. That was, we were the spokesman for the cattle industry because there's mostly all cattle was grown on the reservations. What is really astonishing is when we, in the surveys that we had done, at the time there was about 4.2 million head of cattle in Montana, and Indian ranchers on them 8 reservations made up 1.9 million. So that told us that we are contributors to the beef industry. Now, there's a number of impediments that have happened. When you talked about tax, I'm working with some tribes in the Northwest, and I don't know when this if there's legislation that's going to be recreated to address the estate tax, but they're also talking about doing some tax initiatives, and it would be nice to coincide, to take both and get positive change, not only relevant to the farming ranching industry, but to everybody.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else? So, we talk about, go ahead.
Everybody's involved, labor intensive. And I guess one thing I come back to is we're blessed. I have lots of family around, and we supply a lot of our help with family. But to to keep I guess, recruit candidates out to these ranches, remote places. We have to maybe we got to keep these small towns going. And I guess what I'm getting at is maybe, let's make a conscious decision to go buy tires in Chinook instead of on Amazon, or do a little grocery shopping at Albertsons in Harlem rather than at Walmart. And and I'm not saying Walmart's bad or shopping there, but just to make a conscious decision, let's keep our small towns going when we can, so when we recruit these employees, that their families have places to go, that they can go do things rather than just, go down to the reservoir and fishing and ride horses or four-wheelers. Not everybody likes to do that all the time. So just wanted to throw that out there, I guess.
Yep.
Thanks.
So one thing that's come up is training, the trade schools. What kind of skill sets do we want our labor force to have? And by and large, the conversation will go to, man, if I try to hire out of Montana State's ranch management program, next thing you know, those guys are coming to tell you how to run your ranch. And, that gets more complicated with the owner-operator operation, where we're really just needing some help. And, not everybody out there wants to go and check the water tanks when it's 30 below. Not only today, but if it's 30 below tomorrow, you got to check the tank again. And it just so happens, it seems like that need of labor is really tough to fill. So like our American labor force, there just seems to be less of them wanting to do that job. And, as they get more educated, it seems like you could probably get someone to fill maybe one of your foreman jobs or your manager jobs. But for someone to be that great ranch hand that's going to get the cattle fed every day, to keep the water open every day or whatever, it seems like it's tough. And it's because we all talk about it all the time. So what a lot of places have gone to is H2A. And so that has been a talk that, or it has been asked for stock growers to continue to look at. And there are more ranches and ag operations in the state going to some level of H2A help. Just our story, we wound up hiring many H2A guys to drive feed trucks and do more manual labor things. And it's been good for us. We also hire T and Visa Mexican veterinarians to be on our health teams for our feed yards. And that's been good. Because we ride pins every day. Does not matter what it looks like outside, and you will ride the same pins that you rode yesterday because there's cattle in them. And it's not glamorous, but it has to happen. And to hire a feed truck driver or to hire a pin rider is almost impossible. And I feel like we've almost gone to the last resort. We got to a point where like either we're going to have to get smaller or we're going to do something different, and this helped us. So the H2A has been a big discussion point. And what do we need to do to make it easier for ranches to be able to have an H2A? This process in the H2A, if anyone has any experience in that, in other our meetings there was a lot of experience, but it's a long process. And it's not a guaranteed process. You have to have approved housing. And if there's any hiccup in all of that, it shuts down. Your workers have to go home. And so, also, it's only for 9 months. So you got to pick the best 9 months that works best for your operation. The U.S. House of Representatives has a working group that just had a report come out here last March to make recommendations to change the H2A program. And those changes are, it should have an option of 12 months. Should also re-look at how they have done the formula of what we have to pay an H2A worker, and many other things. But any thoughts on everything that we've just discussed, I guess, relative to labor, or something we're missing there?
Turk, something was just mentioned to me, and I haven't been to all the meetings, but have workman comp rates been discussed at the meetings?
We haven't talked about workman's comp rates, but what did come up at one of the meetings relative to try to be more competitive, to give the employer an advantage as well as the ag worker, is to relook at the employee payroll taxes. And see if we can look at, is there something in there that we could look at that there's an advantage of being an ag worker? And that's an advantage to the worker as well as to the employee. Yep, right over here. Yep.
We've had H2A visa workers. Oh, okay. Renita Brown, Big Sandy. Anyway, we have had the H2A visa workers. I guess I feel like they work on they're on an hourly wage. And farm and ranch isn't really much of a 8 to 5 job. First of all, the other thing that probably maybe irritates me the most was they pay no taxes, didn't have to withhold taxes. They were expected to file a tax return. And that really kind of bothered me because I feel like they should be paying taxes. They're working here, making their money here, and we cover virtually everything for them. We cover their travel to get here. We honestly, actually, they can even get a $4 voucher to go to, there's some program I signed them up for, and it was a $4 voucher to go to a doctor. And so I just think we really treat them pretty darn well. And yeah, anyway, that's, I guess, my comment. But so we didn't have the greatest luck maybe with it. But thank you.
Over here. And just while, they're our most expensive employees. You know, and we have to, obviously, we have long hours as well. They're not our cheap option.
My name is Dexter Buck. I'm here with Bear Paw Livestock. Anyway, our H2A workers, we had two that showed up here a year or so ago, and turned out pretty good. We did everything we were supposed to do, give them a nice house to live in, a car to drive, time off, work and all that, pay them the hourly wage. But they are able to just pick up and leave whenever they want. Now, we've already committed ourselves to quite a bit. And I think that maybe we need to look at that as if they make a commitment to a company or a business or a ranch, that they stay their term instead of being able to just pick up and head out. As long as we provide everything we're supposed to and can prove that we've given them everything that we're supposed to give them and do for them. And it's just kind of frustrating because you get some there and they've been here a month or two and you've got quite a bit invested, and then they just pick up and say, well, I got a better job down the road, I'm seeing you later. And I know we have that in the free world, that's just the way it is, but I would like to address that part of it and see if maybe there's something we can't do about that.
Do you have any suggestions on that? I mean, we just lost a TN worker to a vet clinic in Valentine, Nebraska. So I hear you. But what do you recommend? You know, what?
Well, just when we make the agreement to hire them and they make the agreement to come to our place to work, Okay, and then everything proves out that we've done and followed our protocol, and they've followed their protocol. That, you know, because they're on their telephones constantly and looking for whatever they do anyway. And they just pick up, and we've already got something pretty well established, and they could run the baler or the swather or the tractor, and we could start trusting them. All of a sudden, they're just gone. So there we are left with.
You know what you could do is have them, if they want a new job and they're gonna trade jobs, is they have to go back home first at their own expense and then reapply to come back.
And yeah, that's very good.
That was slowed
Right.
down. Sorry, I'm just taking notes here. Anybody else? Yeah.
So I'll throw a piece out there talking for maybe the younger generation here. You talked about your 3 kids coming up and calving and kind of bailing on you. What were they getting out of the experience other than a paycheck? And nothing against your operation, just things you need to think about with the upcoming generation of workers is what are they getting out of it? The example I'll use for myself was my very first calving season. I told the guy that hired me on, I have never calved before. He stuck me on nights by myself and then yelled at me for things not going well. If I had $1 for every time he yelled at me, I wouldn't have to work for him. It would have been great. But I came out of that not learning a whole lot about calving as something that I wanted to pursue down the road in, you know, trying to start an operation. So that's a thing I think a lot of people need to think about. And I know you said we're gonna talk about mentorships and things like that, but what are you offering as an employer to those younger kids? I agree with you that ag programs should be in high schools. Colleges are what they are, leave them alone. But you know, if a lobbying group can push for an ag requirement in high school, just like we have art requirements and PE requirements, if ag was something more than an elective, you're gonna get a lot more interest from kids from places like Billings or Bozeman, and it's not gonna be limited to our smaller communities. But beyond that, those younger people that you're bringing out and hiring on, one, as long as they're willing to admit they're green and you can accept that they're very green, you need to be able to teach them something they're gonna get out of this and be able to take on down the road, so.
I guess something that just came to my mind is possibly we need a mentorship for the ranchers also, because sometimes, I mean, I agree with you that sometimes we expect people to know already what they're doing and we're setting them up for failure rather than teaching them the right way to do it, because that's just what we're used to. But that could be a possibility.
Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
Just to reply to that really quick. So we go through about 15 to 18 interns a year on the ranch. We have SOPs, all kinds of handouts we go through. We expect it to be a training. We want these kids to be in it. So again, I think that's a great idea. And I think people need to recognize that, because not everybody who brings someone on is going to be nice. And I bet I could count the number of times my dad said, "Good job" on this hand. Okay, so it is a culture. It is a culture thing that happens in these situations, and you hire these guys that get chewed at. They have never been yelled at in their entire lives, you know, and so those are things. But I would say that the one thing that we can do, and I just would concur with that, is that having, like when we started our internship program 20 years ago, we went out to all the universities 2 years, and over the time we've created curriculums, what they're going to learn, how they're going to do it. They're never put on, and so it's those are things that need to be brought up. And I guess that's maybe the takeaway, is that I think that mentorship or having kind of a, how do you go through, and if you're going to bring these young people on and you want them to succeed, what is the, you know, plan for that? So I think those are really good comments, because if anybody worked for my grandfather or anything, I wouldn't be there if my grandfather was still there. I mean, he just was just one of those things. So I know what you're talking about. So anyway, thanks for.
Right up here, Leslie.
Lori Swanson from here in Chinook. back to the H-2A thing, one problem that we seem to have when we had H-2A workers is that the job still has to be posted on your local job service the whole time your H-2As are here, therefore setting you up to have to interview, and if the interview goes well, you have to hire the local person and send your H-2As packing if you don't want to pay both employees. With that, in our situation, our housing is in our same yard. We had H-2As here, and at that time, the local job service people that were wanting to apply were just working the system, trying to get their unemployment renewed. So you would get guys straight out of prison. Thankfully, the one guy that interviewed got arrested again before he actually came to the job because we were required to hire him. So I'd like to see the program reworked a little bit about if we've gone to the extent of getting an H-2A worker and done all of that, we aren't finding anybody from the job service that is going to stay working, show up for work, or work at all. Or come to an interview at all. We've already beat every bush in our area and surrounding states for this employee, and I feel like H-2A for us too is last resort. So for the government to dictate, no, you have to do this and keep that job opening, I feel like, what's the point then, you know? And obviously, yes, I'd be willing to hire an American if I could. And so that part of the rule is really, really hard for us to get around. Also, just to touch on the young people and the mentorship and maybe mentoring the ranchers, I agree on both sides of that. But most recently we've had, and I don't like to be negative when I say millennial, but it really leaves a bad taste in my mouth when I say millennial, because you hire them, they tell you they have all the experience in the world and they can handle it, and then they don't handle it, and then the butt chewing comes along that we are culturally adapted to growing up from our fathers and grandfathers, and they can't handle that butt chewing, but they're also not willing to listen to instruction. And I had 3 conversations in the last 2 months with an employee about taking instruction from your employer and, you know, doing what your employer would like. I realize that you might have your way of wanting to do it, but there are certain things that need to be done to the operation the way it's been done for 40 or 50 years. And if they're not willing to learn, you know, I'm willing to teach, but if they're unteachable, not too long ago when our kids were in high school, there's a sign on the gym that says, uncoachable kids are unteachable employees. Boy, is that the truth, because they will look at you and tell you all day long they know what they're doing, and then they don't, but you ask them to do it your way or try to help them learn, and they won't learn. They'll just continue to do it their way that fails every time. And so that too in the teaching process, which I know it's hard to teach teenagers anything, but I'm getting to that 25-year-old age group of people that absolutely won't listen. So that's my biggest struggle with that. So I do think it's both-sided. Teaching the ranchers, I don't have a lot of patience, but I've learned how to bite my tongue completely off just trying to keep somebody calving. So good points on both sides of definitely for the university systems to have these kids be a little more, less cell phone and a little more paper and pencil.
Any other questions on labor or thoughts on labor, and we'll go to our next group here. You know, the next two, we kind of almost just combine together because we get to this point and we start, you know, you can see how a lot of these topics are interlinked. But we talk about barriers to entry. And, you know, when you frame it to the standpoint of if you were in a profession, non-ag related, and one day you said, hey, I want to be a rancher, is that even possible? You know, how are you going to have access to capital? How are you going to have access to land? And it seems almost impossible. And when you look at the big picture back to national security, back being able to replace ourselves. The facts are there are more producers leaving our business than coming into our business. And if capitalism says, hey, the bigger just gonna keep getting bigger, what do we really want our industry to look like in the next 20 to 50 years? And so if we want multiple producers, we are gonna have to address that issue and figure that out some way. And so we talked about these government programs, but what are we missing? And I know we have younger producers in here. What else are we missing? You know, there's many barriers to the entry, but we always boil it down. Usually it comes down to capital and land, access to land. Maybe there's others that we're not looking at. So want to, let's just focus on that for a minute, and then we'll roll into mentorship.
Kevin Elias Chinook. And I think this kind of all goes hand in hand with everything, especially the capital and input. But I think actually, and I think everything we're doing here is really good, but we've really, in order to get any of this done, we've got to get a handle on our government. Because our government, everything they do, and especially in our industry, it goes against what our focus is. And yes, the government programs are important, and all this is very important, but it's counteractive. You take the capital, and one of our biggest issues is we're allowing people to come in and build housing and resorts and do homes on productable agricultural land. No other country in the world does that because they've went through a famine. Unfortunately, the United States is young enough, they've never had that famine. The food source doesn't matter because most people aren't educated and know where it comes from. You go back to the H-2A workers. We pay people not to go to work more money than someone getting $15 an hour to show up for that job. And you take your LRP, it's a government subsidized insurance that we could do on our own if we were educated in the stock market or the futures market. And then you can buy a put and a call. You don't have to do a margin call, and you can do that stuff yourself. But these government programs, I'm not going to say I haven't taken any of them. I mean, they've got us through a lot of things, but we've kind of got to get a handle on our government and get a grasp on how counteractive they are in everything we're trying to do. And I think getting these ideas together and doing that, but as long as we allow them to do things that are counteractive to our production, and that's what they do, we can have all the meetings in the world we want, but they are on the back end. Every time we go get a government program, they're doing something. The H-2A, you gotta still put that ad out and allow someone who doesn't really want to work anyway to come in from somebody you've already invested in. And I think it all starts there, honestly, and that's just my opinion. But we got to get a handle on government, and if that's where it's got to start. And we don't have it, especially on the federal level. But the state level is better. But on the federal level, I mean, you take the livestock industry. If we were actually to get them to enforce the Packer and Stockyards Act, we wouldn't be dealing with a lot of what we're dealing with right here now. And that's a fight we're doing every day. I'm president of Montana Association of State Grazing Districts. We have the Taylor Grazing Act. There's all these acts that were there to protect the livestock industry, and they're giving us a little bit of handout all the time and trying to get us more reliable on them when they're going back against everything that was set up in place to protect us and what we're doing. And that's just my thought on the whole thing. And I think all this is really great, but asking for more government programs when we don't have a handle on the guys that are giving it to us, we got to get a better handle on that. So.
Hold on. So I agree, but do you have a recommendation? Don't worry, you're online.
No,
we're waiting here.
I can't tell you what the answer is, but we got too much government is what's going on, and they're over-regulating, and I think we got to get a grasp on that. I don't know what the answer is, but these government programs are great, but it's just kind of, it's just another handout, and that's kind of what's got us in the spot we're in, labor and all that, and then I don't know what the answer is, but I think we got to try to do something. That's where it's got to start. That's just my opinion. But.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean it, but I'm I'm with you, but that's what we're here for. Wait, right here, we have,
Well, I think that Bill Brown, Big Sandy, I feel that country of origin labeling on beef, born, raised, fattened, fed, fattened, and slaughtered should be labeled. You can't buy a banana that doesn't have a country of origin label on it.
well, and keep in mind, I appreciate the comment and appreciate, and that's, obviously, those have been really great discussions on all the, the cool discussions, and we're just saying tonight, we're just not gonna, re-debate it or even talk about it tonight, but like the interaction, for sure. Now, there's a recommendation.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher, I can talk loud. They were all ag people. And now there's what percentage of us left? What is it,
think
1.7%?
It's under 2 now.
Yeah, so who cares about 1.7% of the people? We don't have enough vote to get anything done on our own.
Can I get an amen? No. Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to be in the
So I guess, one,
Thank you.
fine grains, meat, textiles. We're just too nice.
Well, and that's where we were back to the context of, this is really a national security issue. We have to make sure the producers in this country can survive, is really the bottom line. And it's a true fact. There are more producers leaving this sector than coming in. It's tough. But let's talk about mentorship.
so I'm just going to
go
make
ahead.
one comment on the barriers or whatever for young people. When we first started, I had somebody call me and mention, like, I talked earlier, and everyone here is very well aware of people buying ranches and taking it out of production. And it's so important that we keep that land in production. And are there incentives for the new owners to keep it in production? And maybe it ties in with the governor's task force as far as the classification of what they're taxed. I don't know if that's more of a stick rather than a carrot, but I think that there's things like that because there's land out there that hopefully a young producer would be able to lease to get started or to maybe increase their herd. But that type of things, if you guys come up with any solutions or possible solutions, make sure you can call us also if you don't want to email something. That's it, Turk.
So mentorship really has been quite the topic that's grown. There's been, okay, well, we'll get there. But there's been a lot of sharing of what has happened, like where we've had ranchers say, you know what, our kids are not coming back, or I don't have kids, but I'm trying to help this next generation get started. And that's been pretty powerful. And we think it actually is a possible solution. And it's really a matter of us taking care of our own. And really, maybe that is one of the ones, it is a solution, is we can't depend on anyone else but ourselves. And so with that, go ahead.
So Lane Schmidt from Chinook, primarily a veterinarian here. Also have what I like to call a hobby ranch to everybody but the accountant. And it's kind of it's not the first generation in agriculture, but it's kind of what we're doing now is the first generation of ranching here on the land that we have at this point with the cows that we have now. And there's a lot of barriers, I think, you know, when you have to have a loan on the cattle, on the land, on the operating, and trying to get into that, you kind of have to have off-farm income of some magnitude to even try to get started. Subsidy from your parents, these various things to even get going. I guess my main goal, one of my main overarching goals in life is to try to figure out how to make a cow and a calf be profitable. So 31 years old, definitely haven't figured that out yet. Okay, one way is to have a whole lot of BLM, to have a place that's completely paid off, to have no cow loans or anything. But when you're young and you have to pay the loan and you have to pay the lease at an actual price, a mainstream price, it's extremely hard to make those cows make money, in my opinion. And I guess that's personal opinion, running a couple hundred cows on a hobby ranch and 150 yearlings, but also watching, being a veterinarian and seeing the productivity of some of these ranches. And I don't have to do the penciling, but sometimes it's like there's no way these things are making money. I don't know how they're staying alive, you know. Sometimes it's the cattle, sometimes I don't, you know, various different things, but there's a lot of, I don't have all the solutions to it, I guess, but there's a lot more barriers, I think, than opportunities in it. So that's my input.
Thank you.
Dexter here again from Bear Paw. We covered a lot of things right now, like Mr. Roth there on the education and the profitability of these cattle. Well, let's go all the way back to the end user of the cattle. That's where our markets are really at. We can do a lot of things. We can get government involved. We can do a lot of things. But if we don't educate the public out there and the consumer who's eating our beef, and let them know why the beef is costing today what it costs, because a cattle feeder today at his risk of buying a $2,000 feeder calf to put in his feedlot and hope to make a profit out of it after putting another $1,000 worth of feed into it, and then talking to 4 different packers that might be interested in the cattle, and they get their heads together and say, well, we got to do this, we got to do that, or the consumer don't want to buy our beef, they don't want to buy our hamburger. Well, we have to educate the people that are using our beef. And we go into, like what Kevin said about our government, our ranchers and our producers have went through a lot by their head counts being way down on the numbers of the cattle. And so our market just exploded, boy. We're out of cattle. We're not going to have enough. But the profitability is kind of back. Should be anyway on the cattle industry, on a cattle rancher. So if we educate everybody down the line, and the end user especially, of why we have everything so high, inflation, interest rates, all this stuff all adds in, input costs and everything, of why the rancher has to have a certain amount of money just to survive, like Mr. Smith said. It's hard for a young person to get in because of all the inflation and input costs and everything, interest rates, all of it, all adds up. But we have to educate our people that are using our end product because that's where our money comes from.
Thank you. Anybody else real quick? So let's just talk about mentorship. So mentorship, could mean different things to different scenarios. One thing a veterinarian brought up when we were in Three Forks that he mentioned there was either went through one of your guys' societies or it was a website that was trying to match up, hey, this vet wants to sell its clinic, and these are new vets coming up looking for opportunities. Are you familiar with any of that?
It's Lane Schmidt again. I'm not familiar with a certain portal, I guess, but through Facebook and all sorts of other things, there's pages and postings on veterinary college websites, but I'm not familiar with any certain portal to match those up.
And what would the objective be, or what was the hope?
Well, I think the hope is the same as what we're seeing in the cattle industry, is to match those outgoing veterinarians with somebody young. We look at these communities in the veterinary industry as well, and one of the hardest things is to recruit somebody young that's not from here back to that community. Same with the workers, is what's their reasoning to stay if they're not from here, and what's the appeal to come here if they're from wherever else in the world.
Do we have any examples of just what worked good for you? Either bringing children back onto the operation, or some of the challenges, or maybe do you have ideas of, our children don't want to come back, or I have no children, but I would like to work with a younger couple? Any thoughts on that? We've had, go ahead.
Kevin Aberg again, Blaine County. I would say in a lot of farmer, family producer families around anywhere up in Montana, anywhere that I've grown up. I grew up in the Hinsdale area. I was blessed that I married into a position where I was able to take over my wife's father's share of his place. But I've seen it a lot that the mentorship, I've seen people that have been bought out, an older couple that didn't have kids, or didn't have kids that wanted to take over a place, and I've seen it where they had an interested young party. They did all the work for them for years. They moved their cattle, fixed their fences, and eventually they got the place. But a lot of times in our family operations in these days, you will see a family break apart a place because maybe they've got 4 or 5 kids. And it's a tough row to hoe to say, well, maybe you just need to pick 1 or 2 to take over the place. And back in the old days, it was the firstborn son gets it. The rest of you go out and get a job and make your way in the world. And if we're gonna keep these places going, there has to be a little bit more of that thought going forward. And like I said, that's tough for me to say because I was blessed the fact that my wife and I were able to just move into that, into what we have today. But I see it, but I came from a large place where I knew that I was going to be working as just an employee till I was probably in my late 50s before I was ever going to have a chance to say, hey, I'm an owner of this. And I don't know how to ever get that message across to people that, hey, I mean, I would say anybody that needs to go to succession planning workshops and actually take this stuff serious, because you can't take a place that can feed 2 families and hand it over to 5 and expect it to work out real well.
Good comments. Anybody else?
To Europe, because those farms go down to family. Go see what exactly the government has done to let them do it without buying it over again like we're expected to do here.
Those were some things that came up from the other sessions on, could there be some tax advantages of, it goes back to keeping it in production. And, you know, obviously the state tax is, it's its own animal, but if that's capital gains, or is that, can I price this at a level back to production value and they buy it from me? You know, what does that look like? That starts getting over my skis to be able to talk about that, but that would be for sure the concept. We've also talked about, I think it was in Dillon, just some younger producers came to talk to me after the fact because they didn't want to talk about access to land during the session because the people that outbid them were in the same room. So think about that. So we have a community that we're trying to maybe keep alive or growing, but you know, it's always to the highest bidder. So that even goes to even lease land. So if you're leasing your place out, do you really go out to the highest bidder, or do you try to go to a beginning producer or someone who's trying to get up and going? You know, are you following me? And a lot of this is just to get ideas in your guys' minds to think about it. I mean, we don't have all the ideas. Our whole point is to stimulate thought and ideas and get it back to us. Because there's been some really great stories. You know, just the one where there's a couple where they didn't have any kids, and they have a couple. They're just gonna wind up, that ranch is gonna go to that couple, and this unbelievable great story. And obviously, it's totally a to each your own. It's your land, your operation, but how do we do it? And because gosh, it's just all so unique. There's every situation. From the unfortunate thing, it seems like there's more situations that the family's fighting, and I don't know what to do about that, because we've all been trying to promote and help with succession planning, but it's one of those stories, if you lead the horse to water, I mean, you just, sometimes they don't always drink, but you know, but yeah, any other thoughts there? I'll be honest, I even, just as we had mentorship, this has developed, like I've even been, my eyes have been open through these sessions on what outfits have done and just some of those thoughts. Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
I think it goes back to what I said earlier. I do think that there needs to be a cultural change in some of this, and that's why I said back to the universities and everything. I don't think students going into Montana State University or Northern should have any false, indication that they're going to make, $200,000 when they get out of school. And I think there's kind of this false narrative in there in terms of what kids are going to make when they get out. Doing ranching and farming is hard work. None of my kids want to come back right now. They hate me right now. They would never want to work for me right now. That's too much work. And I'm fine with that. Go out, find out what the world's like, and then decide what you want to do. But I had to go through the same thing too. And the other thing is, I look at like King Ranch Institute and some of these others, they're at these schools doing this stuff. and they have this, they're going to come out and they want my job right off the bat. They don't want to learn, they don't want to go through and, you know, change pivot wheels and change brake pads and, you know, do the crap work for about 7 years to really actually learn what actually it takes to make a ranch profitable. They want to be right where I am right now. And I think that's, I'm stereotyping that probably a little bit, but that still goes back to something maybe we can do, is to, again, make sure that the people that are educating these kids to come into agriculture, if ranching was easy, everybody be doing it. That's, my father used to tell me that. It's not easy. It's really hard. And so I think we need to kind of make sure that our universities are understanding that what you're getting into, if this is the career path that you choose, guess what? There's no Sundays off, there's no rodeos, there's no this, you're not gonna go here for 6 weeks and do this. It's every day, all year round, for the most part. Now, I'll leave it, and then I'll leave it with this. One, because we're dealing with that, we've made a lot of cultural changes, and that's why I said if my grandfather, he'd probably be turning over in his grave right now if he saw how we were trying to run things. But we are trying to make concessions for young families to go to their sporting things, to go out, do things, have weekends off. We're trying our best to change that, but it is a cultural change even from management standpoint. So those are some things we're looking at doing to try to kind of deal with this new generation of ranching. And I think it can be done. We just have to look outside the box and maybe step back ourselves a little. A lot of my guys are always saying, well, we never got that. When Art Roth was there, we never got that. Well, okay, he's not here anymore, and we got to still get the job done. So anyway, those are just a couple quick comments there.
I see we have two young gentlemen over there. We haven't heard from you guys yet.
So my name is Miles Gravely. I'm originally out of Avon, Montana. I'm a junior at MSU Northern, getting an agricultural operations degree. So listening to all you guys talk about education and everything down there, it really hit for me because I am a part of that younger generation and I would really like to go home. My family's ranch, I'm the 5th generation there. And when it got broken up from the guy, from my great-great-grandfather who started it, he broke it down to his 4 sons. And the ranch I live on now, we own 5/8 of the original operation. And as it looks right now, that there may not be an opportunity for me to go back within the next 40 years and take it over, as my grandpa and uncle are still there. But one of the things that my dad always taught me was to get an education, but to also get hands-on experience with it. If you don't have hands-on experience, you could read every single book in the world and it would make no sense to you at all. So he has pushed me to, after college, go work for someone else for at least a year, and I've told myself at least 5 years to gather experience from different operations. And even while in college, I've worked in Miles City. I just finished night cabin in Havre at the research station up there. And there are people who that are my age and his age, that want to come into agriculture, but they don't know what it takes. And while I was calving out there at the research station, they were bringing kids out of Bozeman to come calve with us. And some of them had come off of cow-calf operations and some of them hadn't. But sitting there and using the information and the education that had been handed down to me from generations and being able to point out those little things that they'll be able to look for when they're calving cattle, it's going to help them out instead of where you got cussed out every night because you're just thrown to the wolves. You know, we had guys that were there for us, and then I tried to tell these kids that didn't have much experience, like, hey, just look for this, and just, if you get in a pickle, call somebody, and they were really open about that. So I think one of the things for this next generation coming up is education, and then hands-on experience, and always being able to, sometimes you got to learn it the hard way. I know I did that a pile of times growing up, is that I was thrown to the wolves and had to learn it the hard way. But at the same time, after I got up and dusted myself off, my dad would look at me and say, well, there's a different way to do it, isn't there? And then he would take me from there and he would continue to allow my education to grow without just babysitting me the entire time or just throwing me out and hoping I can swim.
But Ian, there's one other young gentleman down there.
All right, so I'm Wyatt Smith. I'm from Deer Lodge. I'm a junior at MSU Northern, and what I've heard a lot of you guys talking about is kind of the succession plan of the ranch, and I'm off a family cow-calf operation, and I'm looking to go back to that eventually. And one of the things my parents told me is you're welcome back on the ranch, just create your own job. And I think that's a great idea. That would give me something that I can be proud of when I go back and do my work. My parents aren't gonna be in charge of me, but I can go to them and use their advice, but it's also gonna give me something that I can be proud of. So maybe that's something that you guys could maybe do. Obviously, it doesn't work for every ranch, but if there's a piece of equipment or something that you can maybe let your children use so that they can expand a business, and then they can have pride in doing that work while working alongside of you too. I think that's at least what I'm gonna go back and do, so.
Great comment. Thank you. That actually kind of hit home for me. When I graduated high school, we had to join the military, go to college, or work for somebody else. We had to leave. But that was after we branded and shipped something. But our criteria to come back is we had to bring something new. We had to generate some sort of new wealth, to pay for ourselves. So I think that's great thoughts there. Anyone else? We're kind of towards the end of the program here. I mean, is there any other thoughts that anyone wants to share, or, and if not, yep.
I thank you guys for doing this. This is it's a great listening session, great learning session. I sit here and I listen, and I've thought, I'm one of those guys that thinks 24 hours a day. Even when I'm sleeping, I don't sleep, so I think. But this would have been nice if we'd have started this back in the 80s, because that's about when ranching and farming became unprofitable. And in my eyes, and I look at most of us in the room. I know most of you. I know most of your operations. And since the 80s, if you think about producer profitability, the only way we've been able to stay in business, I won't even call it profitable, is to get bigger. And I look around and I think about what it's done to our small communities. I look out southeast of Big Sandy and how many yard lights are gone. And we're 3 times the size we were in 1980, and we're no further ahead. We just got more work. So again, this is great. It's 40 years in the making, and I'm glad we're at least doing something, and maybe we'll come up with some answers. So.
Any other thoughts? So Ian's going to have you guys warm up your phones again. We have some closing exercises here back to the Menti program.
Yep, and so if you just open that back up, you might need to refresh if you didn't close that tab out, but you should be seeing this question on there. And that question is, of the 5 areas of focus presented, please rank from the most important to least, with 1 being the most important. And again, if you need help getting back to that survey, I'm more than happy to help you get there. That'd be good. And I guess I'll read off the categories too, just as a refresher. But so we have minimize barriers to entry for younger beginning producers, favorable tax climate, labor challenges, improved government programs, and industry mentorship opportunities. Looks like right now favorable tax climate's in the lead, and minimize barriers for entry to young or beginning producers is a close second. And now minimize barriers to entry is number one, and flip with favorable tax climate. Did everybody have a chance to put their answers in? So it looks like we've ended up at number one, favorable tax climate, number two, minimize barriers to entry, and three was labor challenges. Next question is, what topic from tonight's discussion did you find most valuable? And I will just remind you that we are live streaming all the remaining meetings, so if you are interested in watching any of those, just go online and you can watch it via webinar format. And at the Stock Growers mid-year meeting at the end of May in Miles City, we're going to be kind of compiling all the data and responses that we got over the dozen meetings or so that we had around the state, and kind of presenting the final product of all these meetings and what we heard and some of the ideas that came out of it at that mid-year event. So, you know, I know it's a ways down there, but if you are heading down that way for any reason, sure stop in, and we'd love to have you there for that continued conversation at that meeting.
I guess I just want to say that we picked the top 5, but like Ian said, we're compiling all of the things that we have heard. And I go in as president in December, and then Turk 2 years later. So we are committed to continue this process and not just let all the comments and good things that we have learned sit somewhere, I guess. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that that's our commitment.
Just so that y'all, if you can't read this, some of the responses to this question is tax climate, H2A comments, the mentorship discussion, better tax structure, labor and estate tax discussion. Any last responses? And then our last question for the evening is, how can MSGA and the Producer Profitability Initiative serve you and your family's operation?
It can't be you.
The responses we've gotten so far is get the feedback to congressional delegation and the governor, continue doing programs like this and keep the ball rolling, lobbying for FSA regional differences. Creating more awareness to the current struggles of producers and the industry to the wider public. Give a couple more minutes. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, yes, sir. The question is, when we travel back to DC, how do you feel that our response is taken?
Yeah, when you go there and present your case, how do you feel coming back out of those meetings?
Well, you know, I've been doing this for a little while, and I would have to say, where's Leslie? I mean, we were heard, is what I would say last week. And that, you know, when you know, stock growers alone has a tremendous amount of respect just over the years. But when they hear the story of how these resolutions came about, it's not that we made this up. This came from the grassroots of Montana, and it's being acted upon, and having this go through, it's, maybe being the authority is not the right word, but they want to know what we have to say. They want to know, we tell them, hey, we are going to continue to pilot. We're just giving you the high points right now. We hope to have some organized thoughts of what real Montana farmers and ranchers are saying in June. And arguably, I think it's been some of the most powerful information they know they've heard. And we are very much being heard.
I guess part of it too is that we're inviting more than just our membership. We want to hear from everyone. And we're choosing the topics that we think we can come together, like we kind of started this meeting out. And that was very positively received when we were in DC.
You know, what we've done last night, the one thing I failed to mention at the beginning is we've had Bill Bullard, who's the CEO of RCAF, at one of the meetings. We've had Jess Peterson, who's leadership of U.S. Cattlemen's. We've had Farmers Union, Farm Bureau. That is our point, is to say, can we for a moment in time just say, you know what? We need to work together. We need to find some common ground. And these could be some of the issues that we could come together on. And that is where it's powerful. And it is moving. Like that's when we talk about, hey, what did we all get done in DC? Yes, we had great discussions. We met with Tester, Danes, Rosendale, Zinkies, but then we also met with the department heads. Just not to embarrass you, Leslie, but we have no better person than Leslie Robinson holding BLM accountable. To the point, they canceled the meeting. I don't know if I should say that or not. But are you following me? That is, they know we're there with real information. We sat with the Senate Ag Committee staff. Now everyone has a card and they have a lot of titles. And this would be the senior professional staff to Stabeno, right? And you can tell when someone's listened to you, and they wanted to know what we had to say. Because Montana right now is very much on the map, because this would be arguably one of the first times that an organization has gone across their whole state and tried to be very thorough to make sure the voices were really heard. But we're not inviting stock growers members. We're inviting farmers and ranchers. It doesn't matter which organization to, because the bottom line is, what I always say, is the blizzard hits us all. The grasshoppers are on us all. It didn't rain on us all. That's the reality of our world. And we have to be able to work together on it. And I'm just sharing that because I'm talking to you just no different than we would be talking to our senator. And they're listening to us. And we're having follow-up. Our staff is following up with their staff. Spent a tremendous amount of time. You spend a little time with the senator, but then it all comes down to the staff. If you don't have the staff on board, you don't have anything on board. But we have great teams that are just following up. Leslie's really great at helping coordinate a lot of that as well. And so we're not here to make a quick splash. Just like Leslie says, there's a point where, I mean, we are in it. Like Leslie has her tenure, and then I'll have my tenure. That is minimally of 4 years of stock growers that are going to be very, very focused on everything that we just talked about. Yes, sir.
Bill Brown, Big Sandy again. I guess probably the things that are most discouraging right now is APR getting a open range call from BLM, basically, and I believe Fish and Game is releasing grizzly bears wherever they decide to, from the Missouri River to the Bear Paws. So, you know, that's it. It feels like you're fighting a losing battle when you got the federal government and Fish and Game, both federal government, you know, fighting you.
Well, Mr. Brown, we very much hear you, and at least from a Montana stock grower standpoint, that is an everyday, addressing that every day. And that's what this team is. I mean, it's exhausting, but that's what we're doing. Any other quick thoughts? Well, thank you. It's a great team here. Right. See, it's an auction market. If you move your hands, you're in trouble. Well, just some last thoughts here, and we'll have you know, we've talked with the surrounding states. We're trying to get everybody on the same page. We're looking at, after June, taking our thoughts to other national organizations to help build a coalition, and definitely continue to follow up our meetings that we just had last week. And this is going to be a constant grind. And we are here to get results, and we are very, very focused on it. To the point, other cattlemen's organizations are looking at using Montana's model in their state. And Alabama is going to start their series of meetings. And there's some other states visiting with the stock grower staff on how they can do that as well. Because we just feel it's very important that the real farmers and ranchers have a voice, and there's a clear channel to make sure that this gets done. So we'll have the drawing, and then we'll some last thoughts.
Yep, so our lucky individual this evening for the cooler drawing, which I should mention was sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim and Western Ranch Supply, so we appreciate that, is Mr. Dexter Buck. So,
hey, that's all right.
So we appreciate all you coming. It really means a lot for us. We know you're busy, so to give us a few hours of your evening, it sure makes our job a lot easier when we're going to your representatives at the state and federal level to be able to tell them personal stories of folks that we've heard from on the ground. And so we appreciate your time and encourage you to continue to be involved as we go throughout this process.
mtbeef.org, or call the office. So if you have some thoughts pop in, or if you're not comfortable talking in front of everybody, please go to the website. There's a whole form there that's easy to fill out, even if it's a quick thought. That's what we're looking for, is just quick thoughts to be able to share and be able to develop into something of a recommendation to get into legislation. Lastly, Leslie, do you have any thoughts, or Dean? No?
This is a huge movement. I mean, I've talked to people in North Dakota, South Dakota. You guys don't realize what a movement this is. This is something that is a generational movement, and I'm proud to be part of the stock growers doing it, but we need everybody. That voice that goes to DC, it has to be everybody. Everybody has to be, it's a very focal point. If we start wide, get to the focal point, things will happen. It's not going to happen overnight. We're going to have to work at it. But like I say, when you talk about going to these meetings, you can tell your kids you were there.
So with that said, we really appreciate all of you guys taking your time. We try to keep it to 2 hours, and we were kind of close. And there again, your feedback is important. Please call or whatever. If you think we're on the wrong track, just say. And that's what we're here for. Lastly, Bear Paw Livestock, thank you very much for hosting us. I see Dexter's probably out shoveling or doing all the work, right? So thank you. We appreciate you all, and let us know if we can do anything for you.